Hello everyone, welcome back to Anonymous World. Hope you all are doing well. So today I am very excited to start with first episode of Security Talks, and for the first episode I have Mark Lambert with us. So let's get started.
Hey, how you doing?
I am great. Welcome to my channel. How are you?
I am good, thank you. Good, good. Yeah, busy, as always, which is where we couldn't sync until now. And in fact, I'm flying to India this afternoon. So I'm also, one of the reasons I got the virtual background is I got suitcases and stuff all behind me.
Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank you for joining for today's episode. I'm really honored to have you here. So,
I'd say the honor is all mine. Looking forward to this.
so how about we start with you giving a little small introduction about yourself to my audience?
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Mark Lambert. I'm the Chief Product Officer here at ArmorCode. I've been in the application security space for about 20 years. I used to be focused on kind of as a tool vendor, generating static application security testing, dynamic application security testing, API security, IAST, interactive application security testing. So managing a portfolio of tools that would generate data. The interesting thing that we saw in that space is that just many organizations adopt a broad range of tools, not just for application security, but also vulnerability management from an infrastructure perspective as well. And that's what really excites me about ArmorCode. What we do at ArmorCode is we bring data from across the security ecosystem. So everything from application security tools embedded in the pipeline, SAST, DAST, source composition analysis, and the like, as well as bringing in penetration testing and bug bounty program data into one centralized platform where we can cross-correlate that with cloud, container, infrastructure vulnerabilities. So we get unified visibility. Then we can prioritize leveraging business context, threat intelligence information, as well as automate so that we can kind of streamline all of those critical workflows, because this volume of data is a key challenge that many organizations are facing today. So, a little bit about me, a little bit about ArmorCode. So there you go.
It's great to learn a bit about you and your work. So it's 2023 and AppSec is overgrowing. So could you please tell us what exactly is AppSec and why it is crucial in today's digital landscape?
Sure. And really, I think this explosion around application security has really come into full effect in the last 5-6 years. It's been growing. We look back with the first static analysis tools really being introduced in the late 90s. But that is a constantly maturing technology area. But really, as organizations have adopted DevSecOps and really DevOps, and then putting security in the middle, so DevSecOps, it's accelerated the release of software to market. And at the same time, it's accelerated the release of security holes to the market. Now, if we think about that coupled with the explosion of open source, we have this concept where we're all embedding open source into our platforms to really give us a jump start, to be able to kind of address those common frameworks. Log4j is the obvious example. What happens, though, is that open source is out there and people are trying to figure out how to circumvent security practices using these open source libraries, or vulnerabilities, should I say, in these libraries. So when that hits, when a 0-day hits, and a 0-day meaning that, hey, it's out there, it's exploitable right now, we have to figure out how to respond. Now, that's a good side of DevSecOps, right? I can immediately respond and patch, but it means that I have to be monitoring all the time. This concept of software being, waterfall released, and then you kind of forget about it and patch manage it slowly has gone away. So the idea of application security embedded in the pipeline has really escalated significantly over the last 5-6 years.
And it's bound to grow exponentially over the years.
Yeah, it's people have moved from quarterly releases to monthly releases to now most organizations that I talk to that are deploying within the cloud it's intradaily, the many releases, many pushes in the course of the day, and how businesses are differentiating is through software. So there's the phrase, right? Every company is a software company. I mean, it's a little bit overdone these days, but it's true. I think about how you interact with your utility company. You don't interact with your utility company by going to a physical location or sending a letter. You go through your mobile app, right? So everything is now software first experiences. And that drives competitive advantage. It drives customer loyalty. And if you have any security issues in that, they can obviously significantly detriment your brand as well as your core business and regulation as well, where you end up having fines or what have you associated with that.
How does application security actually differs from product security?
Oh, that's a good question. So there's really this intersection. Yeah, it's interesting that you picked up on that one, really. For me, product security is really the intersection of the code and the infrastructure. It's these two things that come together. And certainly, as we've seen with the adoption of application security, if I rewind even just 3 years ago, if I rewind the clock, people would think about code and infrastructure separately. And when we talk to organizations today, they still will typically have a application security and a vulnerability management practice. But those that have heavily embraced DevSecOps, cloud, containers, realize that these two worlds are coming together, and you have to bring the data together to unify the workflow and engage developers in the process. So this is really, for me, the key thing about product security. It's the combination of the entire product. And it's also directly aligns with another movement in the industry, which is the transition from a project-based development methodology to a product-based, meaning that you have a team that owns the product rather than a team of kind of like mercenaries, which is is referred to in one of the tools called books called Innovate. A team of people that come in, they implement something, and they leave. That model's kind of gone away because of agile, because of continuous. You want a team that understands and owns the whole product. It's why we have the concept of product owners now as well within an agile world. So it's this, for me, product security is the intersection between the code and the infrastructure to really kind of like provide that holistic view onto software security as a whole.
Thanks for that. It really clears a lot of doubt because most of the people often confuse among these two terms, application security and product security.
And I will say it is somewhat fluid. The thing about the industry is people will kind of like define and redefine terminology. So there's another one that I'll just throw out there for you. Application security posture management has been defined and redefined by different companies depending upon their view. The very cool thing is that Gartner, one of the leading analysts in the industry, has actually just released research around defining what application security posture management means, and that is a key milestone for the industry, because really now we can start focusing in on that. And actually, what we should do is we have a copy of that report that your viewers can get access to. So we'll put those in the show notes because I think that would be a great piece of reading for them. We have access to the Gartner research and we're able to reprint that. So we can forward that on and put it in the show notes.
That will be great. So you have been in this industry for so long and have such a great experience. Like you said, you have 20 years of experience. So could you share your insights on like what trends you have observed over the years throughout in the field of cybersecurity, or especially in application security?
Yeah, and my background is as a developer. I used to be a developer way back when, and then I realized I like talking too much. So I moved into technical field, then I moved into product, which is obviously where I am now, because I really enjoy this interaction between not just the technology but the business and how we can actually solve a problem with that. So as I look at how the industry has evolved, if I kind of like rewind 20 years ago, yeah, I know I don't look like I'm that old. I gave a presentation at a conference called Java One, which used to be the premier conference for Java developers, and in that presentation, which was 2004 or 2005. I can't remember specifically, but in that presentation, I gave a session to about 450 attendees, which was about Java security best practices. And it was all focused on, how to secure the JVM and what have you. And, even at the time, I was like, these are the security practices, but it's not really where the security problem is. And this is the thing that I said, my kind of like mic drop at the end was, this is all great, but this only protects your JVM. Now, if somebody's got access to your JVM, you've got a bigger problem. The thing you need to be watching, and this is when SOAP, Service-Oriented Architecture Protocol, was first out. And he said, you need to be watching your web services, because web applications are the interface we all see, but SOAP services are there and attackers know where they are, but there's no UI. So you were not validating it. That, we've already talked about the acceleration of software releases, right? I think that's a big driver. We already talked about open source, right? And the executive order in the US and the drive to software security from a software delivery pipeline, from a software factory perspective, is really important. But this idea, this trend of APIs being used, I mean, APIs are now exploded. They've far exceeded kind of like normal website traffic. And as an attacker, I'm not, I'm looking at the web front end, but I'm really interested in those APIs that are behind, because often those APIs don't have robust security practices in place. Often, as your audience is probably aware, you're like a single page web app, right? It's making a whole bunch of API calls, not SOAP, but REST APIs. Those REST APIs are often not documented, so therefore they're often not known within an organization. So they represent a significant attack surface. So that is a trend that I've been seeing grow over the last 6 to 9 years, and it's constant. I mean, it surprises me that really it hasn't got quite as much of the attention as I would expect. But you do see a lot of players in the space. You see Warlarm, Traceable, Salt, No Name, right? These are kind of like the primary folks that you hear about. But then you also see the DAST vendors like Probly, for example, who I was just talking on our podcast here, Let's Start AppSecOps. Yesterday. That recording will probably go out in a couple of weeks. They're testing and doing DAST testing of the web front end, but and also introspecting to see, okay, what APIs are being called. So I see things moving faster. I see kind of like broader attack surface, and all of this means I've got way too much data. I don't know what to do first. I've got all of these tools, and this is the problem that we're focused on solving at ArmorCode. Bringing that data all together, normalizing it, correlating the findings from across the tools so I can know what are my top priorities, and then really kind of optimize the team's work. Because, chasing rabbits that are, hey, this is a vulnerability, but there's no actual known exploit, or it's on a back-end data sciences application, not my front-end web app that has PII or PCI requirements, is what's causing a lot of teams to flounder. And we're optimizing that process is going to be key, because I don't see the amount of data. I don't see the amount of scanners reducing. I don't see the amount of vulnerabilities reducing. I don't see the amount of steps the attack surface reducing either.
Yeah, day by day, new tools are also coming, and at the same time, new vulnerabilities are also arising.
Yes, yeah, and there's this rush in the industry for like the naming authorities to create a vulnerability. Hey, I found a vulnerability in this tool, because there's a certain amount of a kind of like a badge of honor to say I've got X number of vulnerabilities. But the reality is not all of them are actually exploited or exploitable in the real world. So you have to kind of like, there's this explosion, but there are real vulnerabilities as well. So we're in this dichotomy situation. But yeah, 100%.
Nowadays, also there's a lot of talk about AI, like chatbots like Bard, ChatGPT 4. And so, how do you think AI and machine learning are influencing or will influence the application security?
Sure. As we discussed before, I've been in this game for two decades. I think this is my third AI is going to solve the world hunger arch. So I'm a little bit jaded on it. I mean, I firmly view that AI is a tool, and we should leverage AI where appropriate to solve problems, not just start going, oh, we have AI in our tool, therefore it's that doesn't solve the problem. But what's really interesting is there have been a number of AI techniques that are already out in the market. Machine learning, you referenced that a few moments ago. As you start to look at data, and not just point data, hey, a vulnerability, a finding, but how people work with that data, you can start predicting what actions should be taken. So, I can see, for example, in your organization, most of the time, this vulnerability is actually not an issue because, whatever reason, right? So you can predict some kind of trending. The interesting thing with the most recent wave with the ChatGPTs of the world, which, by the way, you really have to look at what you get out of ChatGPT, garbage in, garbage out, and it's really important that you train the model. It shows a lot of promise, though. And I think, for me, one of the best things that it can do is to actually explain what the problem is. A lot of people struggle with the adoption and understanding of security terminology, of what different types of issue are, how to remediate them. And if we treat it as a tool to provide additional education, I think it's very valuable. What we have to always remember, though, it is a tool and it's a machine. So, again, I'll reference Gartner. I was at the security risk, what was it called? Security and risk summit. I can't remember what it was called. But anyway, it was in the Gartner conference last month. And one of the analysts, Mark Lambert, gave a presentation around artificial intelligence, the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of thing. And, that was it was a case of, is it ready for prime? He was specifically referring to ChatGPT, and the short answer to that question is, well, kinda. But does it show promise? Definitely. I think it gives us the ability to handle that volume of data thing, which is like, hey, I've got all of this information. How do I bring it together so I can figure out what to work on? And then once I figure out what to work on, what should I do with it? But just deferring to the AI, which is what we as humans, we have data to show this, humans will trust the AI more than their own intuition. There's examples of CCTV doing facial recognition and the police arresting the wrong person, even though when you looked at the image, you could clearly see it wasn't the same person. There's a case of this in England. So, we have to recognize that we have to kind of like trust but verify. But I think it shows a lot of promise, especially with handling that large data, to focus on prioritization and education as to what to do.
Yeah, AI is sure rising, and also the new chatbot came, Warm GPT, which is also in rise.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you look at what some of the larger industry players have done, like Microsoft's of the world, to really train the models in a certain way. And I think that is what's going to be key. So, anybody that's kind of like releasing the functionality to market very quickly is typically probably they're just slapping something on top of the public domain models. But there's a lot of potential there if we can invest and do the kind of research to, again, filtering that large volume of data and turning it into some useful information.
So, like you get a lot of opportunities to attend a ton of conferences and summits and be around some great cybersecurity professional minds. And I must admit, I am a bit jealous of you on that part. So, how has your experience of attending such conferences have been? Does it benefit in like your career or networking?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, there's really three. There are three things that I focus on when I'm attending these kind of events. The first is self-education around kind of like, and that's going to the presentations, right? It's okay, what is somebody saying in this area, and kind of like seeing how if it makes sense, if I can apply it, and just kind of like an awareness from that perspective. The other is a general market awareness. This industry is very broad. If anybody ever goes to RSA or Black Hat, it's a real circus. I mean, there's a lot of folks. As we were talking in the beginning before we kicked off here, I live in Los Angeles. Black Hat is in Las Vegas. I'm only going for a day, but I'm going to do two primary things. One is to see what's going on in the market, what kind of the trends that I'm seeing people talk about. I'm going to meet with customers, which is really, really important because, it gives you an opportunity to meet face-to-face and network. And then the other part of networking is the partners for me as well. So, sitting down, meeting the partners, sitting down at a breakfast or a lunch, or even just sitting in a coffee shop and striking up a conversation with the person next to me. It's really interesting because everybody's there to learn. So everybody's there and usually pretty open to have a conversation. Hey, what do you do? What are you seeing? What are you finding interesting? What are the challenges that you're facing? And that opportunity to kind of like just grow your personal awareness, but also your network, is a key way for personal growth and also, career expansion as well, especially during those kind of like days when you're kind of like trying to figure out what you want to do. Because I think a lot of people will look when they're practitioners that, hey, do I want to stay to be a practitioner? Do I want to be a leader? Do I want to move over to the dark side and become be on the vendor side, which I decided personally pretty quick in my career. But that I think is a great opportunity and something you get out of conferences without. That's the soft benefit. The primary, obviously, the obvious thing that everybody talks about is the sessions themselves. But the networking is a massive piece, which is different, which is why I'm so glad that we're kind of out the other side of COVID. So,
yeah, so we get a great amount of exposure by attending these conferences.
yeah, exactly. And it's, if you're looking to grow your own personal exposure, so there's obviously going to presenting yourself, although that's often difficult at these larger conferences.
Yeah.
But if you're wanting to get down that path, my advice would be start doing presentations at smaller conferences first and build up from there. So you can say, oh yeah, I've presented at this conference or that conference or this user group in my local city. That gives you kind of like credibility. And as you start going into submitting papers and what have you, they see that traction. The other thing that if that's an interest for your audience, I would suggest joining the OWASP organization. So that's also another way to get into chapters and be able to go to local events and what have you, and kind of like grow your own awareness. And then from there, when you go to the conferences, just network with the speakers and say, hey, I've got this great topic that I think would be good. What would your advice be? That's a great way of growing your network, but also, potentially identifying ways to start, elevating your own visibility as well.
That's great. So how about we wrap it up with the most common question among people, like how one can land a job in AppSec? What are trends in jobs and pay trends in application security?
Sure. So the one thing that I'll note is there's never enough application security engineers. That's just a reality. I talk with organizations all the time about how to optimize the team that they have. And, that's one of the big drivers behind ArmorCode. I think, the biggest thing you can do early on in your career is just do. Right. So work on a GitHub, have a project in GitHub, start setting up the scanners in GitHub, understand what the data is, start with source composition analysis first. It's the most straightforward type of application security scan. Move on to using SAST. GitHub has some great free tools embedded in there. Look at the free tools from OWASP. So that's OWASP Dependency Check, OWASP Zap. Burp Suite is a great DAST tool where there's a free version as well. Once you've touched those areas, SCA, SAST, DAST, those are the three key pillars when you talk about application security. Again, working inside of GitHub, you're going to start getting data. And then when you're going for an interview, you can say, okay, look, I have this GitHub project. I've done this. I've set this. I understand what these terminologies are. But then also, if you're already part of a development organization, put your hand up and say, I'd like to have, be the security champion, right? A lot of organizations try to do a security champion program where within the development team, you've got a point of contact who is security seat at the table. And you put your hand up, say, I'll do that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start learning more about the vulnerabilities, you get specifics as you are that translation or that conduit between the teams. So do some stuff on your own, put your hand up within the team and say, hey, I'd like to participate and take this. And that's all going to set you with a foundation. One of the great recruiting tools for the security team to grow their team is the security champion program, right? Because it identifies people that are interested in security and want to kind of become more aware. And then last, as I referenced before, engage in communities, engage in OWASP, engage in other, local meetups around security, just to drive your general awareness. And that's that's the foundation in my mind. I will also point out there are a whole bunch of things on YouTube, as well as public courses that you can take around application security as well. Look on LinkedIn to see if there are any certifications that you can do through LinkedIn. Again, these are the things that a prospective employer will say, oh, I see that they've attended. LinkedIn is key. I should kind of re-emphasize that. When I'm hiring, the first thing I do is I don't look at the person's resume. I look at their name. I find them on LinkedIn. And that's kind of like that's the public source of truth. And then I'm comparing the resume and the LinkedIn together.
Thank you for sharing your insights on all the questions today. I think we will wrap it up here. And once again, thank you for joining me today. I hope it will clear my audience doubts. And I will drop your socials in my description so they can reach out to you there and
Yeah.
with you.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, we run a podcast at ArmorCode, Let's Talk AppSecOps. We should put that link in the show notes as well. We do a podcast at least once or twice a week. It's either myself or my colleague Luis Guzman. We're together. We're usually together. So we have a lot of fun. It's really lightweight, but it'll give you a general awareness of what's going on in the industry as well. All right, take care. Thanks very much for the time.
Thank you.